All right, so while we're admitting the last few folks here, I can go over some of the standard housekeeping things that we always need to go over. So before we get started, please mute your mics and turn off your cameras unless you're speaking. If you are using the Teams app, you can use the chat to type in your questions or use the hand raising tool and we'll give you the floor so you can turn on your mic and ask your questions. The tools for muting and hand raising are at the top in the toolbar next to the leave button. And if you're on the phone, we have, I think, 3 folks calling in on the phone. You can mute yourselves by hitting *6, mute and unmute that way, *6. We will, those of you who are on the phone, we will give you opportunities to ask questions as well, since you don't have the hand raising functionality. Just FYI, this meeting is recorded and is as such public record. So, good afternoon. Welcome to our library meetup, our typical Friday get together here on this snowy afternoon. My name is Jeanette Schaefer. I'm the Assistant State Librarian for Library Advancement, and I have with me my colleagues from the department. So, colleagues, if you could introduce yourselves in the chat, that would be great. And if all of you attendees also wouldn't mind putting your name, role, and library name in the chat as well, just so we can kind of get a feel for who's here and where you're from. So today's meetup is structured into 2 distinct parts. Jason Broughton, our state librarian, will provide you with a funding update and a very brief Q&A about the funding. We want to kind of use every opportunity we have to give you an update on the various pools of funding that we see coming our way. So Jason will be doing that. Then we're going to move into talking about the Vermont Forward plan and what that means for opening your libraries and how we can interpret the rules. So for that segment, we'll address the questions that have been submitted beforehand first, and then we'll open it up to you for additional questions, and hopefully just for a little bit of discussion and back and forth on ideas that you might have on how to deal with certain anticipated situations, and see if we can kind of get a conversation going. So with that, Jason, are you ready to give us a funding update? You are muted.
I am ready. I just need to move a screen or two. And I think we have it ready. All right, what I want to do, there we go. That's the way I wanted. Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to work to share my screen, and some of the things that I will be discussing, some of the remaining staff, I'm Jeanette and Josh might jump in, and also Jonathan, to talk about a few unique points of view on what we are examining and experiencing, because a lot of things are moving fast, not glacial anymore. And as some people like to say, that the states are going to be flush with cash. I wouldn't say that exactly. I would say that a lot of money is definitely coming into the state, and the state itself is preparing on how to navigate those specific uses of funds. There is a wide amount of flexibility, but there are still requirements. So that means we need to pay attention to what the options are and see how best we can triangulate ourselves with libraries to see what we can do to get some of this funding. So my goal today is to alert you to a variety of funding streams that you should be aware of and see if you would like to take on an opportunity. I do know that a lot of people have said that they are extremely, extremely tired. We all have. I mean, you think about it, a lot of us have not done anything outside the state of Vermont going on between 20 to 15 months. That's something to think about. Not saying that you didn't do a staycation, but it does mean that things are a little bit more different in the way of trying to connect to friends and family or stepping outside of the state. So for that, I fully understand because I'm right there with you. In our conversation today, feel free to put a question into the chat, or if we have the availability as quick as possible to connect with you to have a discussion. But I expect some of this to be more highlighted by the consultants as opposed to me, because my goal today is to give you a lay of the land and the resources on where we got the information from and how you can partake of it. So I will now begin to work to share my screen. And with that, I will attempt to go at a moderate pace so it's nice and comfortable. So as you know, I receive a lot of information and I'm in a lot of things because I'm going to make sure the libraries get their due across this state. There are still a few projects that I want to work on a statewide item, but that is for another day. Right now, our main emphasis is on a variety of set of monies and looking at, are we available to get some? And if not, who are the entities that will have it? What I am showing you, if you're watching my screen, is what is known as an article from governing.com. It's a government magazine, and I will make this available to you because it nicely wraps up what someone did from IMLS and ALA by constructing really, really concretely all of the funding streams that libraries across the country, whether you be public, academic, school, special, can consider funding for themselves. So let's start off number one. The biggest for us is the Institute Museum Library Services. Most of you should know it well because that's where our LSTA funding comes from. With that set of money, they have received $200 million separate from what the states get. It was IMLS, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the National Endowment for Humanities always gets usually a separate funding from that. What they have done is divvied up all of that money to the entire US and also the, guess what, corresponding associated territories. The funding floor for the US territories was $200,000 plus by counting by the census. In our case, for each US state land side, we ended up getting $2 million plus what they looked at when it comes to census data. So for us, the Department of Libraries will be receiving $2,135,000. We know that that is being moved. We have not officially gotten it yet, but we do have the notification letter. There are some key requirements that, again, have wide berth for us to consider, but the requirements primarily have some very unique stances that will have to be navigated. Broadband to a certain degree, hotspots, MiFis, tablets, computers, those types of items. And some people might be saying, oh, I rejoice right now. Here is the concern. All 50 states and US territories have this, not to mention other countries are doing things with fundings for their countries as well. So there is a backlog when it comes to technology equipment, particularly things that go to a consumer. So we are trying to pay attention to what that looks like. In addition to the state is doing telework, the state itself, through the Agency of Digital Services, will also be putting in a statewide purchases for the state of Vermont. That's going to be massive. So we're going to be paying attention to see what can be ordered, when can we get it, is our biggest item. In addition to that, things that deal with learning and literacy, standard library services. But again, there cannot be any replacement revenue for what has been lost for libraries, such as bonuses or different items. I saw some of those questions, or to staff. There is a personnel item, but we are waiting to see back what that looks like from IMLS. So again, a little bit more expansive. There's some berth within that. COVID mitigation is also part of that, and that can include indoor and outdoor items. We are seeking a little bit more insight from them to understand what type of furniture one could buy, what can't be buying, but we have a nice amount of options. Will this please everybody? Not so much, because $2 million is nice for Vermont, but the need will be great and we will see how to manage it. Our unfortunate problem, however, is our money from IMLS must be completely dispersed and used by September 30th of next year. The state of Vermont, however, is a little bit different. For those who are paying attention, the state of Vermont will be getting $1.3 billion, in which a large percentage of that must be provided to your towns, cities, metros, without any requirement added whatsoever per the actual original ARPA plan. So when you hear us say ARPA, that stands for the American Rescue Plan Act. So this is why you heard me say early on, a lot of your towns are going to get money. Peter Welch has already said, for example, without being official, who is getting some money immediately. The city of Burlington got $19 million direct from the US Treasury, which is quite interesting to see. Burlington will receive 27.5, I think, million dollars when it's said and done from the ARPA plan. Barry will be getting 2.25 million, but every single city and town in Vermont will receive money. And you might find that very interesting. The goal now is how much. Everybody's waiting to see what that looks like because one of the drawbacks is, if you remember, the census numbers have not been published. They are still being worked on, and the states will not be getting any census data officially until September of this year, which presented a whole another problem, which is redistricting. But that is not my conversation. That's more the Secretary of State. Another entity that you can look toward, and Josh can talk about this later, him and Tom, is what is happening with the FCC, Federal Communications. They have what is known as an Emergency Connectivity Fund. As you can see on the screen, it's a rather large amount. But remember, anything with the FCC is going to require, in some cases, filtering. So you'll have to navigate that. Most schools, in some cases, will be more happy about that if they're already signed up. But it's another way to look at money if you wish to do it that way. Josh will talk a little bit more about that, him and Tom. You will then see local government. $360 million is going to them directly. All I can say with that is connect with your local government to see what funding might be available through them. There was a question that someone asked saying, can any of this be used for construction? No. The only thing that we have found within the national plan and our funding for libraries, there's no construction. But I'll talk to you in a second about what options are still available. For states, however, water treatment plants, dams, things of that nature. Yes, roads and some light bridges, but not a lot of construction the way people like to see it can occur with this current level of funding. The education stabilization plan is a rather large one, and this goes for secondary and elementary education. As you look at that, that is a very unique amount of items because what it's called normally is short for ESSER. And there are a lot of funds that are available here, and if libraries are connected to their school in some way, there are opportunities to do with that. The higher education, again, that takes us out unless we have any academics on the call, but academic libraries will need to connect with their locations through the higher education fund to find out how to tap into that level of money. For libraries, however, you have another area that you can look at. National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for Humanities. We are partners with them and work very, very closely with both of them. When they release their grants, libraries will be eligible for that, but it might require some heavy reading to understand what the requirements are. And you think about arts and humanities, sometimes these things are in conjunction with where you live for a specific type of action or an item. Could be painting, could be artistic design, could be programming. So you'd want to know what that looks like once they release their plans. Again, I can't give you much because all of us have not released any of our plans because we still are awaiting some requirements from the federal government, including the Agency of Education. So you will be seeing this probably roll out within the next 3 to 4 weeks about a frenzy of information is going to come out about what people are going to say. Here's how you can obtain some funding. If you are connected to any childcare, there are also now childcare and development block grants in the CDBG. Is what they call that, a large amount to try to make sure that we deal with literacy learning and the youngest of our populations and how to continue with that. But you will probably not be able to apply to that directly unless your library has a child care or some service connected to that that is already and continue going. But if you are a partner, then you might want to work with the child care organization to find out how you can assist them in making their services, which then, of course, provide you a little money as well. Head Start, no need to even discuss that. We all know that. Pretty simple. If you have one at your library, you might want to be able to consider applying OL. If not, by association also works. Then this is going to be the more nuanced piece that Jonathan will probably talk about in a nice way. There is state level after school funding. The states do have a large amount of money. I think Vermont has almost like 1.5 million that it is looking to do with for after school programming, and Jonathan will get into what that means for you, and for summer programming. Yes, there are opportunities for libraries to get paid for something that they already are doing, which is summer reading. I hope that that makes you smile, but some of you might say, I'm so tired, I can't do another thing, another grant, oh my goodness. We have to understand the next 3 years is going to be a flush of money. And then, of course, the state is required to pass on a certain amount of money without any restrictions or requirements onto the local entities with that money. So you might even see two funding streams if you are in certain locations. Your local community will have money and the state actually will have money for the same thing. Again, very unique items to consider. So let's look at one that you should be prepared for, which Jonathan will get into, which is the summer grant program. This is going to be done by Vermont After School, just showing you the images of what it looks like. I already know one library at least has their information into the system, but I don't know if they've applied to the grant yet. So kudos to you, you know who you are, and they are doing a lot of things with summer reading, but they beat the information to the punch. They already have their stuff keyed in. So some people are saying, we see this as money. If you want to also look at an additional set of funds that allow a little bit more flexibility for operations and relief, as opposed to what I just said, the American Library Association, and that was in our digest today, and it was a few days ago. We want to remind you that they have a COVID library relief fund for any type of library. I'm showing you that they're having a webinar, and your max is $50,000, and of course your base is $30,000. No match requirement for these. It is a webinar, but as you want to fill out the form, you can see what it looks like, and this is kind of it, but this is just the webinar. If you're able to get it, it's pretty nice. The FCC, which we will come back to later, again, this is where you talk about connectivity. You can also do a whole host of items when it comes to devices and broadband, but again, the FCC is going to have some requirements, and it might require that you put on certain types of filters for your information, for your public computers or your Wi-Fi. But again, it is funding if you want to look at it. Those are all the general funding streams that are happening right now or about to launch. The last, as I close out, is going to be something that is a little bit different. The Department of Libraries has worked feverishly with the Vermont Library Association to pull off, I'll be up front, a coup. We have been able to get all three congressional leaders to co-sponsor this bill, known as the Build America Libraries Act, to repair and modernize library facilities. And a lot of you on this call today emailed me saying, is there any money, any way, any money that you can think about when it comes to construction? So we are trying to give you what we know through the state is available. But as far as library funding, that is at a crawled pace, but this opens that opportunity up. This bill would give IMLS $5 billion, and IMLS used to do construction as part of its work. And then when they stopped, it moved into the C got dropped off, and now we just have the Library Services and Technology, LSTA. They're asking a lot of people for IMLS to restart that program. $5 billion to be given to IMLS. We don't know what the window would look like to do construction, but we believe it would be 2 to 3 years, which is pretty quick, and in some cases pretty problematic. But our congressional leaders have signed on to this bill, along with a variety of other leaders, and you can look it up. But the key thing is to highlight here, if you can see it, massive. Its key goal is construction, renovation, and major broadband changes. You would always have COVID in a sense, being something, again, mitigating it. They have added, though, natural disasters and emergency management planning. You would notice that we also gave some CE to that because that's going to be a burgeoning thing, upgrade and repairs. And then, as you can also see, hazards for mold, lead, asbestos, and increased stability and energy efficiency. The more nuanced pieces, and I don't see this happening here if it's what the funding that we do understand it to be, but you can use it for assessments, needs assessment, master planning, financing new library facilities, making capital improvements. You can even consider buying bookmobiles, which is quite stunning. So when we inquired as a department, we asked, well, what would the floor look like if we received this money? Well, hang on to your seats. If this passes, Vermont can look at minimum $10 million in construction and renovation funding. At max, $20 million. But we know for a fact it would not be higher than 20. But that's still a substantial amount of money to help a lot of different types of libraries, from ADA compliance to HBA systems to a whole host of items. So Within that, I hope this makes you wonder, gives you pause, makes you smile, might make a few people anxious. We don't know what's going to happen with this bill because we no longer want it to be separate. There is a movement to move the bill from being separate into the president's overall infrastructure bill, which again is stunning because if we get $10 million, the state of Vermont will also probably get $1 billion just for infrastructure. So again, more money coming to local communities in a very unique way, but specifically for infrastructure. With that, that is all that I have. I hope that this has assisted you. And the last comment, and Tom and Josh will talk about this, is the state of Vermont did get a lot of money. I have been strategic on a request. The Fiber Connect network is degrading. It costs us too much money to do it on our own. So you probably, if you have seen the reports, yes, the Department of Libraries has put in a request for the state of Vermont to still give it more money from its ARPA funds, which the governor at this moment is looking at, but we will see if they agree or disagree. The agency secretary has put that request in for me. It has made the papers, and we were seeking $750,000 to upgrade the entire Fiber Connect network, which has 40 libraries on it. They came back with an offer of how about 500,000, and then we will see what we will do once we get the money. So that is also in play. That is all the funding that I have fought for and can update you on, and I hope that this brings you some level of assurance and some comfort that we are working to try to give you as much money as we can once we also receive it. Thank you. If there's any questions, I will take them, but I think that might be it, and I will shut up. Thank you, Jeanette.
Thanks, Jason. And we've had just a handful of questions, but while you can type your questions in here for Jason, Josh or Tom, did you have anything to add quickly to what Jason said about any of the? Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Hi there. I just wanted to talk very briefly about the Emergency Connectivity Fund. That's the $7 billion one that would go through the FCC. The answer is that we don't have the important information yet. We know the number, but we don't. The crucial aspects are what it's going to look like, whether it will require filtering, it's sort of focused on homework and schoolwork for students is kind of the core, but what that will involve and what the application process is going to look like. The usual E-rate application process is somewhat Byzantine, so if that's going to be it, then that's pretty relevant too. So the short answer is that FCC just finished the commentary period and now they're thinking about what they're going to do, and fairly soon we should have some information, but until that happens, it's kind of all hypothetical.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate that. And Jonathan, I think you're in the same boat where you can kind of give us a heads up on the summer enrichment programming and a webinar that's coming up.
Yeah, I already put them in the chat. I put the links in the chat for there is a webinar that is through Vermont After School that is next week, and there seems like the following week there's going to be another information session that we don't have details about yet for summer programming funds. So I put the link in there, and then there's also the programming map that Jason mentioned. I also put the link in there so that you can share your planned, all your amazing summer programs that you're planning. You can share them there through the map. And yeah, that we will be sharing out more information about all of that. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. You can certainly email me.
Great. Yeah. And as soon as we find out anything about any of this, we will be sure to get it all out. So Catherine had a question for the FCC ECF monies. Are you working with Department of Education for coordination, trying to do that locally, but always nice to have statewide air cover? Josh, you had an answer.
Yeah, so just we definitely will once we know more of what they're looking for and what kind of scope these projects are intended to be. I think originally it was kind of seen as mostly a 4G hotspot project, and then it sort of expanded from there. So, but yeah, we will definitely coordinate with H2 Education when we can on that.
Great. Thank you. I want to give a chance to the folks that are calling in to ask a question about the funding sources right now. If you have any, please go ahead and unmute yourself, *6, and ask your question before we move on into the next topic. Okay. And again, you can always ask at the end as well if you missed your chance now. So I don't see any more questions in the chat specifically about this. And that makes sense because there's just so much coming at us that we don't have details for yet. So again, we're going to keep you informed of all the various things that are coming out as they come out. So thank you so much, Jason and Josh and Jonathan, for this. And Laura, do you want to lead us in the next part?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you know me. I'm Laura Keenan. I'm the Governance and Management Consultant here at the Vermont Department of Libraries. And so we have some exciting news to share with you. You've probably heard a bit about the Vermont Forward plan. And so we wanted to go over a bit of it with you and really just try to pare it down to the pieces that apply to libraries specifically. So I'm going to share my screen. You may have seen this graphic. It's been going around. It's the new ACCD graphic, and it's the new graphic released by the administration to help simplify things for us all leading for the next few months. So we're currently in step 1, and that lasts through the end of April. And for those of us who are in libraries, we're called the Group B sector, we're pretty much keeping the same rules that we've been keeping since last year. So everything is the same. Then if everything goes according to plan with the vaccines and what we see rolling out, starting May 1st, we all get to switch to what's called universal guidance, which has 5 pieces to it, some of which are much more applicable to your day-to-day operations than others. So this is the universal guidance, and you can see if you just type in universal guidance in Vermont, it should bring you to this page. And it's got just 5 pieces to it that really simplify things down from those mandatory health and safety requirements that we're currently following and you will follow until beginning of May. Now, the big caveat to all of this is that these are setting some standards that you can be more restrictive than these standards if you wish. You could absolutely do that. But the governor and the administration is trying, and the health department and ACCD are trying to make things a little bit more flexible as we continue to open up. So the 5 things are: 1, stay home if you're sick. So if your staff shows up and they have any of those COVID-19 symptoms, you got to send them home. Number 2, masks are still required. So just make sure that your staff and people coming into your library still wear masks. Number 3 is probably the biggest one for us to concentrate on, and it's ensure those 6-foot spaces. So just like you were doing last year when you're thinking about what your maximum occupancy for your building or for any gatherings that you're doing, you looked at your space and you said, okay, given the unique setup of my library or my outdoor space, whatever that is, I just need to make sure that there's enough room that every person or every family unit can have 6 feet between them and the next family unit or the next person. That's really the guideline to we're hoping that you'll grasp onto that really simplifies when you're thinking about summer reading programs, when you're thinking about events at the library, when you're thinking about how many people can come into your building. If you just use that 6-foot space as you're looking at your square footage in your building and your setup in your building, and use that to help guide what you're doing. Next one, again, is that good hygiene. So people still need to be able to have access to bathrooms and hand sanitizer. And then the last one, think before you travel, is perhaps not as applicable to us, but all the quarantining stuff has changed a lot too. So those are the basics that we switched to in just a couple of weeks, which is pretty exciting to really simplify it down to those. And then starting June 1st, things are pretty much the same for us too. the gathering sizes increase, but if you look at the gathering information, it's actually a bit more complicated than we probably need to worry about, because it is allowing for maximum numbers of people that can go into spaces. And most of our libraries in Vermont, the 6-foot distance is going to be probably more helpful for you in determining how many more people you can have, because these maximums are pretty large. So we're encouraging you to not worry too much about those maximums. Just think about the 6-foot space, and your maximum, if you use that thick 6-foot space, is probably going to be a lot fewer people than what these events are talking about. And the ACCD is providing these event guidance for the big venues, which we're not. So hopefully that helps in thinking about you know, what you need to be paying attention to. It really simplifies things quite a bit. So a lot of the details that we've been thinking about before are no longer in play starting May 1st. And that, you know, that really helps us look at a lot of the questions you've been submitting and makes them fairly simple to answer, because many of the questions we have now are, does this still apply? Does this still apply? Does this still apply? And by the time May 1st comes, the answer is oftentimes no. So the overall message is you still need to make sure that you're deciding what you want to do, what's going to work for your space. If you want to be more restrictive than this, you're absolutely welcome to do that, to take the safety measures that work for you. The other thing it says in the universal guidance that you need to make sure that people stay 6 feet apart. But what ACCD has really been emphasizing is you just need to make sure that people have the space to be able to get 6 feet apart from each other if they so choose. That's what they're really worried about. You know, they don't need you to be going around monitoring where people are standing, really just to make sure that the people have the space if they need it, whether or not they're vaccinated. So, so pretty much, you know, staying the course till July 4th, doing what you've been doing, and deciding on July 4th, you know, when things become more recommendations rather than mandates, and the details about all that will be coming out. What safety measures are you going to keep in place? Are you going to still require masks after July 4th? That's something that you'll probably want to start talking to your board about, because they are required up to July 4th, but then after that, they're recommended. You know, what sort of events are you going to have? How many people? All that sort of thing. So hopefully that helps with some of your thinking. And so now we're going to move into some of the emailed questions that you sent to us. To hopefully you can think of some of the answers at this point based on what I've already said. So the first question that we've got, and we keep getting a lot in email, is, with the shift to universal guidance on May 1st, does that mean we don't have to do contact tracing anymore? And the answer is correct. You don't have to do contact tracing starting May 1st. So huzzah for one fewer thing to do. It's no longer mandated. You can, if you choose that you want to do that, you're welcome to, but it's no longer mandated. And also, what about employee health checks? Again, starting May 1st, it's no longer required, but you still need to send symptomatic people home, and to make sure that anyone who's been exposed, who has not been vaccinated, would need to quarantine if directed by the health department. Let's see. We got this question, can you ask people if they come into the library if they're vaccinated? And what we've been advised is you can, but if you choose to start asking people who come into the library if they're vaccinated, you need to ask everyone. You can't self-select. So consistency is really key there. We've been asked, do staff need to still complete the VOSHA training? Not after May 1st. Again, you're switching to universal guidance after May 1st, and it doesn't talk about that, so you don't need to do that VOSHA training. And then we got this question about thinking, you know, gatherings versus people who are already in the library, and how do you calculate all those numbers? And basically, you know, the ACCD is like, just think about that 6-foot space. When you're thinking about how many people you have in your library for events, for regular, for stuff outside, think about your space, how much outside space you've got if you're doing an outside event, and how many people you can fit in if everyone has to have that 6-foot distance. Again, you don't have to monitor that, but just calculate that in, or in your library, really just use that to calculate your occupancy and use that for your guide. We got this question, do you still need to apply time limits for people in the library? There's no requirement on time limits. At this point, it's really just the 6-foot space is key. If you decide to have time limits for people to sort of shuffle people through so that you don't max out on your occupancy limit, you're welcome to do that, but that's not required. We got this question for outdoor programming in the spring and the summer, the number of people allowed to participate and the social distancing required. What are the dates and what are the details around that? Again, it's that availability of 6-foot space is what's required until July 3rd. And then there'll be other guidance recommendations after that. And can we require masks to be worn at programs this summer? Yes, if your library determines after July 4th that you want to require masks, you are welcome to do that. So those are the questions we got ahead of time. I have been hearing that there have been some questions in the chat. I don't know, Jeanette, if you want me to address any of those or if the chat's been doing that.
Yeah, so a few things. Jason wanted, actually, Jason, you had your hand up. Do you want to just alert folks or do you want me to alert folks that?
I can jump in real quick.
Yeah,
Thank you. For everyone on our meetup today, as Laura said, everything is true, but there is one caveat you must remember. There's really two. We do have variants, but they are very small and the state is monitoring that. So we all know that we need to be flexible and adapt should anything change. The goal, as Laura has said, basically is for the state to reopen at this current plan. But you should pay attention to knowing if anything changes, the state of emergency could be reinstituted, because that's really what drives everything. And if we find that we are not in a good place, you can't come back and necessarily say, well, you said we could. And we might say, a lot more people are dying. Do you really think we need to do this now? We need to always be flexible and understand if the state of emergency goes through and lifts, we're going to be okay. But if we find we're not in a good place in the coming weeks and there is unfortunate death and destruction, then we know that we will probably have to do this a little bit longer. So please remain carefully vigilant with information and understanding, just in case you have to quickly adapt and change. That's all I needed. Thank you.
That's a really good reminder. We had several questions that we're answering on chat, but for the benefit of folks who are calling in, we should probably address some of them. We can lump them together. And Corey had more of a discussion question, which we might, after we go through and answer all of the pure straight up questions, maybe we can go to Corey's question, which is really more about what's the discussion, what's the sense about around once July 4th hits and we get to decide what safety levels we want to implement in our libraries, like mask wearing, how does that work if my library decides that we need to require masks? So that's a good one, Corey. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's see what we have here theme-wise. So health screening and contact tracing, once universal guidance falls into place on May 1st, are no longer required. Almi mentioned the ACCD webinar on Wednesday. It was wonderful, and we can't recommend it highly enough. It will answer so many of your questions. It was probably one of the most useful things that has come out of ACCD in the last year, and they've been doing wonderful work. So really impressive. Then masks will be recommended after July 4th, but not required. Will guidance be the same even if all staff are not vaccinated? Yes, the guidance is the same across the board. And Laura, when we talked about this, some of the guidance and vaccination versus not vaccinated, and how do we let people into our space if we don't know if they're vaccinated? Do you want to just talk about sort of how we thought we could handle that?
Yeah. In the ACCD webinar that happened on Wednesday, there was a lot of conversation about this, actually, especially for the big venues who are letting in lots and lots of people. And I thought to myself, well, the libraries aren't considered enormous venues that'll be letting in lots and lots of people. So my suggestion for you to consider, especially if you don't want to be asking everyone who comes in, is just to consider that everyone is unvaccinated, because that's the more restrictive requirement put out by ACCD. So and even at that most restrictive limit, it will probably take a lot for you to hit the limit of how many people come in to your space. So yeah, so if you just assume that everyone's unvaccinated, even that low number, if you look at the Vermont Forward plan, is still pretty high for the maximum number of people. If you compare that to your space, the limit probably will be hit faster with your space limits than that unvaccinated number for gatherings limit. That might be different if you're outside, but think, June 1st, the maximum is, several hundred people. I'm guessing that you won't hit that. But I mean, if you do, look at the calculations with the ACCD site and that'll help. But again, most of our libraries are fairly small. I mean, even our big libraries probably don't want to let in the maximum number of people they could with their square footage. I mean, you might be totally okay with that. But again, you can be more restrictive. And that's what I keep coming to. Just use the most restrictive thing that you feel safe using with you and your staff and your trustees, and that will hopefully help.
Laura, I have a question. That some people might not be thinking about answering because you do highlight it. What are your thoughts for those who want to do summer reading or summer programming or festivals or events put on by a library outside because they have the space? Lots of our libraries do have space outside. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so no matter how much space you've got outside, it's still going to be limited in some capacity. So the first thing to think about is look at the limits of your space. If you've got a gigantic field, that's one thing. But if you've got like this outdoor patio, use that and think about square footage. But also keep in mind the things that we've been emphasizing from the beginning, which is, airflow is great outside, so that helps with that spread of particulate matter. I would recommend that you talk with your trustees about requiring masks even after July 4th, if that's going to help you and your staff and your patrons and the public feel more comfortable, and be consistent about that. Make sure you got that hand sanitizer out there, and decide if you're going to have limits in terms of how many people. And then, Jonathan just popped up. He has a PowerPoint that we shared at our last meetup that's still on our website. If you want to share that again, that talks about other guidelines that can really help increase safety. Do you want to talk about that, Jonathan?
Yeah, I actually already shared it. I tagged it as outdoor programming guidelines, and it's really helpful. It does a lot of what Laura is saying, where it talks about, before you even do any outdoor programming, to really think about how that's gonna, like, the space that you're using, especially any like constricted areas where people are coming and going, entrances, restrooms, to really think about any signage that you might use. So I would recommend looking at it. It has a lot of really helpful guidance around that.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. A few more questions about, can we have meetings again in our spaces, or if people are renting our space or using the space, can they use it? As long as you can guarantee the 6-foot spacing and you're adhering to those, the handful of universal guidance points, you may let them into your space again. So that's really the key. And ACCD was really interested in simplifying things. And if, the 6-foot space, as Laura said, is really the key to operating. After July 4th, there was a question, can the spacing then, will the guidance be the same after July 4th? Then the social distancing will be voluntary, so it's up to you and your situation, but it is no longer required. So July 4th, yeah, go ahead, Laura.
And the ACCD said on Wednesday that the specifics around what the recommendations will be after July 4th aren't out yet. So so we don't know if they'll recommend 3 feet or what will happen. But that will be coming out.
Yeah. Okay. Then can we do a session like this for trustees? And Joy responded, yes. So again, I recommend sending the ACCD webinar to trustees, because those folks can answer the questions much better than us, and did answer them much better than us. And this is also recorded, so they can hop onto that and then also contact us if they have specific questions. Okay, so let's see what else. And I want to give a chance to folks who are calling in, if they would like to unmute and ask questions. This would be a really good time. And while we wait, yes, masks will still be mandated outside prior to July 4th.
So I just wanted to address Almi's question a while back about, or her suggestion that the number of people based on 50%. Fire code is more helpful than the 6 feet circle, but up until like in the next phase that we'll be in, the 6 feet is still required in your
Yes.
universal guidance. So you
Yes.
can't not do the 6 feet, even if you're also meeting the 50% fire code. And I wasn't sure if that's what you meant, Almi, so I just wanted to make sure that was clarified.
And the ACCD gave us a shorthand for the 6 foot distance. It's 30 square feet. So if that's more helpful and looking at your entire square feet and dividing it by 30 square feet per person, that can be a shorthand way for figuring out how many people can be in your space.
Yeah. And Marie asks, is it 6 feet around a family unit? Yes. So a pod gets 6 feet. So if you're not in the pod, you need to stay away from them. A cow's length or sofa length, as they said in the webinar. Okay, so Jen, oh, thank you, Jen. We're happy to help. Okay, so I'm not hearing questions from out in the field, in the phone, and I think we may have addressed everything in the chat. So I wonder if we could, Corey, can I put you on the spot and maybe open the discussion about what your thoughts are when we get to the point where we don't have masks required? Or anybody else?
Yeah, I can't say I've actually thought about it much, but just hearing this sort of everything becomes recommended, not required, and trying to imagine a patchwork of businesses and organizations in different towns doing different things. And I'm trying to wrap my head around how I would require a mask in my library if, say, the town offices aren't.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just sounds like a point of conflict that could be pretty intense, given the feelings around mask wearing in particular.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And if folks have thoughts on that or answers or things they're going to try, I think the key is really knowing why you're requiring masks if, say, your town, your municipality isn't, and being able to explain it and sticking to it as well. And again, consistency is key as well. And Almi, you had your hand up if you want to chime in.
Sure, thank you. This has been great. I just listened to that archive webinar today, so it's very fresh in my mind. And one of the things I remember that might help with the topic at hand is that they suggested that individual, you know, they said businesses, but I'll add libraries. Oops, sorry about that. Can be more restrictive because of our knowledge of our community and our patrons or customers that have a variety of levels of comfort with risk. And so I think that can be really helpful for us to be able to explain to people why we might still be requiring masks, because we have such a cross section of people coming through our doors.
Yeah. And also somebody mentioned a bunch of children who obviously aren't vaccinated, and folks getting together in small spaces after that as well. So again, Almi, that's actually a really good line to take because you're also not giving away any particulars. Say you have vulnerable staff who would be safer if you had a mask, if folks came in with masks. This would be more of a neutral stance, and you wouldn't have to give away any private health information as well. And Michelle, you've had your hand up. I don't know if that's a fresh hand up. Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for doing this today. I'm sorry I wasn't able to access the chat for the entire time, but in terms of responding to this question about what to do after the July 4th, one of the things I'm going to do right now is meet with my board and suss out their feelings about what they're comfortable with after July 4th, so that I have solid backing from my board. But the other thing that I will do is begin to talk to some businesses and patrons in the community quietly to see what their feelings are, because I think that it's important to reflect the needs of the community. Of course, yeah, we always have to take health and safety into concern as a factor. But I think it's important to talk to your community and see what they're comfortable with.
Yep. That's a really great reminder. And it's a really good start just to see what they plan on doing as well. Also a reminder, and I know Jason probably would say this if he had the mic, is a reminder to talk about any monies coming in as well. Talk to your community. It's really, really important as well. So are there additional questions coming in, comments, hand raising, anybody in the phone want to chime in? Oh, timeline about IMLS ARPA money that came to VTLIB. Okay, Jason just responded. So we have not yet received the money. We got the letter, and
Yeah, I can
Jason
chime in
said,
if you
yeah,
want.
go ahead. Yep.
So everyone, yes, IMLS, as you know, is a federal entity, and we know that they're like the FIC. You know, when you look at the signature from the bank, you say, oh, you know, you're federally insured, so we know the money is coming. But Mayor, for your question, so everybody's aware, we have received the disbursement letter. We assume it will come between now and the end of the month. And once that occurs, we still have a secondary letter because the money doesn't come, as you know, directly to us. It goes to the state and it sits in the account, and then we will work to create the pathways for that money to come out. And the reason why we're taking this additional step is we are going to be, if this is done, and I'll have other future webinars or conversations outward, we are looking at creating 5 different accounts of 5 different funds because the department is seeking a lot of additional funding from other sources. As I've said, sometimes I have my hand in everybody else's sandbox when they're like, your sandbox is full. Well, I want a little bit more dirt is the easiest way to say it. So since that occurs, the state will need to work with us to set up these specific funding codes and different accounts, and then we can begin the work of distribution. Now, what that looks like is going to be very unique because the state of Vermont has $1.3 billion. And if you remember that, that means a whole host of agencies and departments will also be creating grants that go out to communities and also individuals. So we are trying to examine what it might look like because we believe we will need additional help. We may hire an additional finance person to assist with this because there's no way in the world we can do this by ourselves. Now you might say, well, yes, you can. You guys are a scrappy little group. Look what you did last year. That's nice, but all state libraries across the country have let IMLS know that I think it's Michigan or maybe it was North or South Dakota that actually has 360 public libraries. You have to assume no group of people can churn out 360 grants for the level of money that they're getting in one massive time. And our funding mechanism is connected to the state. So we have an internal business unit of 2 people. And then we have the state's business unit that also has about 5 people. But those 5 people have to deal with 6 other departments, and they have another layer to deal with, which is state government, where everybody in finance is going to be doing this. So we are going to work methodically to see how we can make sure that things come out timely. And that is the next layer that we will do with. As far as the survey results, they were wonderful. They are helping us guide our thinking on what libraries need, and we will compare that to what some of the requirements are, and then we can get the ball rolling. So we expect to have a lot of libraries be pleased, maybe surprised, but as you know, we might not get everything you want, but we hope to accomplish quite a lot, is the easiest way to say that. So a lot of grants will be coming out very, very soon.
Thank you, Jason. And let me see, not sure if I missed this, but when will they post the July 4th guide, or when will the July 4th guidance come out? We are not certain when that will come out, but again, we'll keep you in the loop as soon as we see something. So they're working on that now. Where will the recording be up? It will be, oh, Joy posted the link of where the recording will be. And I want to give a shout out to Joy here, who has been just posting links and answering questions behind the scenes. So thank you for that. Let me see. Mary, you're hearing that it's leaning toward a grant type process. Yes, there'll be a mix of us doing statewide purchasing and also some grants as well. So that's correct. Okay. Joy, am I missing any questions that we have not yet addressed? I think we've got it all for now.
I think we have them all.
Okay, anybody on the phone want to ask any final questions? Corey, I really appreciate your question and having us kind of think beyond what the actual guidelines are and sort of thinking about what happens next and so a little bit further out, because it will be important to kind of jump to July and see what will happen, because it'll be here before we know it. And I think the important part is really for your libraries to understand, again, that it is up to you to operate in a way that is as safe as possible for your communities. And
I want to
that's
jump in
really
on
the key.
one item that some people said. Hello, everybody, this is Jason. We will probably point you to a webinar when it becomes available, or if needed, we will do another informational session. You know, we've been doing a lot with the HR topics. I've noticed a bunch of questions that even in state government we have asked, and it is almost a let's cross that bridge when we get to it. Let's go to reopening before. And the question that I saw that I personally have asked myself is, what do you do if employees don't want to get a shot? And we have learned two parts of things. Businesses can require that. We know that for a fact. A business can. Now, how that's dealt with is going to be the issue. For public-facing entities, it's probably different. So state government, which is a public-facing entity, says it would like to take that when it comes. So when we find out more about what that looks like, we will be able to provide you with more information on how do you navigate employee interactions when half your staff says, yes, I'm getting it, and the other half says, I'm not getting it at all. And even in the not getting at all, there are still caveats. There are some people who say, I want to wait. And then you have people who say, I refuse. I absolutely refuse. It's my constitutional right to not get a shot. What happens with that? So there are a lot of unknown questions that we too are waiting to see what information we can find. And we would be happy to give that to you, because we're going to go through an interesting period over the next couple of months, and you will also do that as well with trustees, friends, the community itself. We will try to assist you with whatever we have. Laura and Joy, Jonathan, Tom, Josh, not what you can say, but say, here are the scenarios that you might need to think about, and it's going to be best to connect with HR or your town officials on their policies, because you should not do this alone. You're about to enter into a gray, murky zone, because state government itself is also about to enter into a gray, murky zone. So hang on, pay attention, and I don't want to say enjoy the ride, just slowly breathe, know that you got up that day and that you're going to go home that day, and you put that problem aside and deal with it the next day. Work to enjoy yourself as much as you can.
Well, with those wise parting words, I want to make sure that we wrap up in time. Thank you, Jason. Laura, Joy, Jonathan, any final comments? Words, Josh, anything else before we wrap it up for today? Okay, and this does take a little bit to record to process the recording, so give us maybe till Monday or Tuesday to get this recording up. So thank you for that. So thank you for participating. Hope you enjoy the snow and your hot beverages and things that give you comfort, and we will talk to you as soon as we have more information. Thank you so much.